legal descendants of Abraham, and those of the Israelites. And then there were those who wanted to associate with the nation of Israel. So they weren't legally bound by that covenant, but they were flocking to worship Jehovah alongside this nation as well. We have examples. We have Ruth, for example. Ruth of the Moabitess. She was not an Israelite, and yet she benefited from the fair treatment and worshipping alongside the Israelites. In fact, she, as we know, became a descendant of Jesus. Before we explain what this really means for us today, let's read Zechariah 8, verse 23. Reads there in 23, "This is what Jehovah of armies says, in those days 10 men out of all the languages of the nations will take hold. Yes, they will take firm hold of the robe of the Jew, saying, 'We want to go with you, for we have heard that God is with you people.'" There's an illustration of that verse there on the screen. So, this is a little bit repeating that kind of the same idea, but there's a few key elements here. There's the 10 men aspect, and there's the robe of the Jew. You see, the 10 signifies many. 1 Jew, 10 men. It can also signify completeness in an earthly sense. But the point is, the point is that there'll be lots, far outnumbering the Jews themselves. When it comes to the robe, however, those tassels that were hanging on, they were distinctive. In fact, as far as we know, only the Jews did this kind of fringing on their garments, and that blue thread also was something that only the Jews did. Was it cultural? Well, no, it was actually a commandment from Jehovah. So that fringe reminded the Israelites that they were bound to follow Jehovah, that He was their God, of that covenant relationship with Him. So when there's 10 men are grasping the tassels or the fringe of the garment, what are they grasping? Because that's really a subservient posture, right? But they're not grasping the nation, they're grasping Jehovah's laws. They want to serve Jehovah in His laws alongside the Israelites. So again, reiterating that they're alongside worshiping. And notice they take firm hold, not letting go of those commands. It was quite a bit of significance, and that's very likely why they chose this specific image to highlight. This image was specifically chosen to highlight the meaning. So what is the meaning for us? Well, today, friends, people of all languages have certainly flocked to Israel. Now, this isn't physical Israel we're talking about, because Israel rejected Jehovah. That covenant was given to spiritual Israel, what we know today as the anointed. That's how that's been fulfilled. So people of all languages have flocked to what? The anointed? No, they flocked to Jehovah, to worship alongside those of spiritual Israel. Just like the scripture said in Zechariah, the men would flock. The 10 men would flock to the robe of a Jew. So the majority of us are really of that 10 men. But how do we support this work? How do we support the spiritual Israel? We do it primarily in 2 ways. One is by wholeheartedly supporting our preaching work. Again, it's about teaching and preaching about who? Jehovah. And second is through our finances, financially supporting this work. It's by doing these 2 things, friends, that we work alongside spiritual Israel, or these anointed, in worshiping Jehovah our God. And that's how we, as most of us, as the 10 men, can grab firm hold of the robe of the Jew.
Thank you very much, Brother Armstrong. And now we'll have Brother Nightingale helping us with the digging for spiritual gems, so we look forward to your comments. So tonight, our gems will be pulled from Zechariah chapter 1 through chapter 8. But first, let's focus in on Zechariah chapter 5. Can we please have a volunteer to read Zechariah 5, verses 6 to 11, please? Sister Nightingale.
So I asked, "What is it?" He replied, "This is the ephah container that is going out." He continued, "This is their appearance in all the earth." And I saw that the round lid of the lead was lifted up, and there was a woman sitting inside the container. So he said, "This is wickedness." Then he threw her back into the ephah container, after which he thrust the lead weight over its mouth. Then I looked up and saw two women coming forward, and they were soaring in the wind. They had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the container between the earth and heaven. So I asked the angel, "Who is speaking with me? Where are they taking the ephah container?" He replied, "To the land of Shinar, to build her a house, and when it is prepared, she will be deposited there in her proper place."
So what is our responsibility regarding wickedness today? Sister Nikki, please.
We have the responsibility not to allow wickedness to creep into and dwell amongst Jehovah's people, so that we can maintain pure worship for Jehovah.
Thank you. There was a question there when we were asked. Anyone want to comment on the question? Sister Mason, please.
Well, it speaks about our remove to keep our house clean. So we want to keep Jehovah's congregation spiritually, morally, and physically clean.
Thank you. That was nicely covered. So we'll move on to our next scripture. Zechariah 6, verse 1. A volunteer, please. Sister Shemet, please.
Then I looked up again and saw 4 chariots coming from between 2 mountains, and the mountains were of copper.
Thank you. So what do the 2 copper mountains represent? Maybe we'll just talk about the mountain part first, and then Sister Rie.
The mountain represents Jehovah's universal and eternal rulership.
Thank you. Sister Speaks.
And the other mountain represents the Messianic kingdom in Jesus' hands.
Thank you. Now, what about the fact that they're copper? What does that represent? Sister Boucher, please.
The copper is a metal that is highly valued and very good quality, and it really shows us the quality of Jehovah's sovereignty and the Messianic kingdom.
Perfect. And now we'll open up the rest of the chapters. So, what did this week's Bible reading teach us about Jehovah? Sister Nightingale, please.
I was just thinking of that illustration with wickedness being put in that container, and we can see that if we're to get rid of wickedness, it was a heavy lead lid. So we need to make sure that we're putting wickedness far away from us, not just arm's length. So we wouldn't want us putting a thin film over our ephah container, as it were.
Thank you. Nicely said. Brother Tanner, please.
He was really trying to encourage the Israelites to get going with their true worship. So in chapter 2, Zechariah reminds them how he will protect them. In verse 8, it says, "Whoever touches you touches the pupil of my eye." So what a nice illustration of how sensitive Jehovah will be in protecting his people when they are faithful to him.
Thank you. Brother Mark Gibbons.
Zechariah chapter 7, the latter part of verse 10, Jehovah desires that we do not scheme evil against anyone in our hearts. And this is certainly pertinent because when someone hurts us, or maybe our family, it's so easy to begin